Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Markiplier theory, and in this video we will be taking a look back at the timeline, because the timeline of the Markiplier lore is something that I haven't really talked about in a while, and I feel like we just kind of need to revisit it again, just to kind of make it more clear kind of what we know so far, or what we theorize about so far in terms of the Markiplier lore. Now I can already tell this video is going to get a bit controversial because the timeline, that's a big topic, that's a big subject in the Markiplier lore. It's pretty confusing and still to this day not fully 100% solved. It seems like the community can't really come to like a good conclusion on what we think it is. However, I do have an idea on what the timeline is that I've expressed in many past theories that I'm pretty much just going to be going over today, kind of a bit of a refresher. So yeah, let's get into it. So actually, if you go to my channel and you go to the playlists I've made, you'll see one just titled Markiplier, and there is where I try to keep all the videos canon to the Markiplier lore that I know about in order of where they go in the timeline. Now, of course, there's a couple exceptions in there, like the In Space with Markipliers. There isn't really a good spot to fit those, which I'll explain more about later. And there's also a few other videos that don't go specifically before or after other videos, but they just kind of needed to be in a certain spot, and that seemed like a good enough spot for their inclusion to make sense in the lore. Take, for instance, the King of Squirrels being right after Wilford mother-loving Warfstache. I don't actually think that the King of Squirrels takes place right after Wilford Warfstache. It's just I know that they most likely take place around the same point in time before Markiplier TV. That's the only sort of limit or variable at play when discussing the King of Squirrels video and where it should go in the timeline. So that was just a good spot to put it compared to where everything else is. That doesn't mean that I necessarily think that it goes there specifically, but I think it's probably best there for now in terms of where everything else is going in the Markiplier lore. Anyways, hopefully that's not too confusing. Now let's get into actually going through each video. And of course, in the Markiplier timeline, the video that kicks off everything else is the series known as Who Killed Markiplier. But there's even still quite a bit of lore that takes place before Who Killed Markiplier. Before Who Killed Markiplier, apparently Damien, Actor Mark, and the Colonel were all friends. Celine, also known as Damien's sister, ends up falling in love with Actor Mark, but then the Colonel steals Celine from him, and then Actor Mark gets mad, tries to plot revenge, also known as attempting to murder all his friends and himself in Who Killed Markiplier. However, in terms of the timeline, in between every single Who Killed Markiplier chapter lies one of the Jim videos. You know the ones I'm talking about, the ones where Jim and cameraman Jim wander around the mansion of Who Killed Markiplier and try to find out what the heck is going on, and every video ended either zooming in on Jim's butt or crotch. In case you couldn't tell, very important to the lore. I mean, come on, what's the Markiplier lore without 1,000 Jims everywhere? But in all seriousness, after the 4 Markiplier chapters and the 4 Jim videos, next up in the timeline is the video known as Damien. This actually technically takes place during Who Killed Markiplier Chapter 4. It has been confirmed by Markiplier himself that during the scene whenever Darkiplier's picking up the cane and goes from the girl hand to the boy hand, that is when all the events of Damien happen in just that single second, all of it inside of Darkiplier's head. So technically Damien doesn't really come after the final chapter of Who Killed Markiplier. It more specifically happens near the end of the final chapter. So whenever creating the playlist, the best I could do was put Damien right after the events of Who Killed Markiplier. So now strap in, people, because this is when the timeline starts to get complicated, or I guess vague is a better word to describe it. I believe that next up in the timeline is Wilford mother-loving Warfstache. I know that there is lots of sayings and stuff throughout this video about how it's been years since their last encounter. It's been years since Abe and Wilford last had that shootout that happened at the end of Who Killed Markiplier. But also another thing Markiplier confirmed whenever he was doing one of those live streams where he explains a lot of stuff about the lore. He confirmed that they think in their brains that it's been a long time, but really, since like the world is kind of messed up and stuff, and due to like just the rules of the universe the Markiplier lore takes place in, actually not much time has passed at all. It like takes place right after the events of Who Killed Markiplier, even though it feels like years have passed. Another good theory about Wilford mother-loving Warfstache comes from Amazing Purple Girl. She says, in my headcanon, which is my fanfic, actor Mark absolutely did kill Celine and Damien, and not just by stealing bodies. Abe is only being kept alive by the house, keeping him in his own world, so again, he's definitely dead. If this is true, then this could mean that Wilford mother-loving Warfstache only takes place inside of Abe's head, which, considering everything that happens throughout that video, is a huge possibility. Shout out to Amazing Purple Girl for putting her own thoughts on the matter in the comments below, and if you guys have any thoughts or theories, make sure to also comment them down below, and I might feature them in a future Markiplier theory. Anyways, at this point in the timeline, we're about to get introduced to a lot more Markiplier egos. In no specific order, we are going to be starting to see videos about the King of Squirrels, Bim Trimmer, this one redneck child seller, the Silver Shepherd, Silver Sheep, whatever you call him, and of course, Bing and Google. All these characters, including a few more, are going to be getting their own storylines. The Silver Shepherd's alter ego is having sex with his wife. That one redneck dude from earlier is having trouble finding somebody who wants to buy his own child. Google and Bing are at odds, and the worst news doctor is giving people the worst news. So now you might be wondering, while all this stuff is happening, what's going on with our beloved Wilford Warfstache? Well, he's currently having a fight with Slenderman. But besides that, he's also starting his own interviewing business where he gets to interview people. He ends up interviewing people like Markiplier and Freddy Fazbear, which has some pretty weird lore implications. Does this mean that the FNAF lore is connected to the Markiplier lore? Well, yes, but not in the way you think. Let me explain. I'm willing to bet that the more likely possibility is that this means that the random encounters FNAF musicals are what's canon in the Markiplier lore, because those videos alone already feature a Night Guard Markiplier, which could be another Markiplier ego that just adds on to our never-ending list of Markiplier variants. I'll end up looking more into the connection between Markiplier and FNAF in a future Markiplier theory, so make sure to stay tuned for that. So anyways, that's what Wilford is doing. What about Darkiplier? While Darkiplier spends most of his time just angry at actor Mark, there is one time where he ends up encountering Antisepticeye and they end up fighting pretty much. Now I know, just like with the FNAF connection earlier, this technically means that Jacksepticeye's lore is also canon and takes place in the same universe as the Markiplier lore, but I'm not even going to try to put any of the Jacksepticeye lore into this already filled up timeline, mainly because I don't know anything about the Jacksepticeye lore. But as we move on, eventually Wilford Warfstache gets the idea to start some sort of TV show thing, so he ends up calling up Darkiplier and all those other Markiplier egos that I talked about earlier, and Wilford pitches to them an idea for a TV show. The rest of the egos kind of had mixed thoughts about it, so it never really ended up going anywhere. Anyways, after the events of Markiplier TV, we know that Googleplier gets an upgrade and turns into 4 Googlepliers, each with a different colored shirt. And now we're getting to a heist with Markiplier, where Darkiplier ends up finding some blue crystal on the ground, and he ends up trying to use it to destroy actor Mark and you, the viewer. He actually ends up failing and tries to do it again in A Date with Markiplier, where he tries to sabotage you and actor Mark's date. And while Darkiplier is attempting to complete his story arc and get revenge on actor Mark, Wilford Warfstache is over here just building an animatronic of himself that can do interviews and kill people. And that is how far we've gotten on the Markiplier timeline. But wait, you might ask, where is In Space with Markiplier Part 1 and 2? Those were never in the timeline. That's because they take place in a whole other universe. In Space with Markiplier is essentially the origin story of the blue crystal and how it ended up in the Markiplier lore universe. So for that reason, I put In Space with Markiplier Part 1 and 2 before, like right before A Heist with Markiplier in the timeline. But that's because I didn't want to include them out of it or like not have them in it, even though it's not necessarily in the same timeline as the rest of the Markiplier lore. So technically there isn't really a good spot to put it in just one single playlist. So Behind A Heist with Markiplier is the best I could do. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below what y'all think the timeline is. If I got anything right or anything wrong, make sure to let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below, and I will love to read them and maybe even feature them in my next Markiplier theory. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Markiplier theory. And this one is a bit of a continuation to my last theory, where pretty much I left one question unanswered about the Markiplier lore timeline, which was if the Random Encounters FNAF videos are canon to the Markiplier lore. Now I get that this is a pretty random question, so if you haven't seen my last Markiplier theory, let me explain to you why I'm even here questioning this in the first place. So pretty much a while back, Markiplier made a video where Wilford Warfstache interviews Phone Guy from FNAF, and it ends with Wilford Warfstache getting jump scared by Golden Freddy. And originally I thought that this video single-handedly connected the Markiplier timeline with the Five Nights at Freddy's timeline. But then after I took a second to ponder my existence in reality, I realized that maybe this video doesn't mean that the FNAF lore and the Markiplier lore are connected, but instead it could mean that the Random Encounters FNAF series is connected to the Markiplier lore. Since Markiplier does feature a prominent role in the Random Encounters FNAF musicals, what if that's just another Markiplier ego just lurking around in the wild? But first, before we can solve this, we need to figure out the difference between the actual FNAF lore and the Random Encounters FNAF musicals lore. So, if you have not yet watched the Random Encounters FNAF musicals, then I highly recommend clicking off this video and going to watch them now. I mean, technically you don't have to click off this video because I'm literally about to summarize everything that you need to know. But I just mainly recommend watching them first, mainly because they're just really good videos with a pretty good storyline as well. And if you are a fan of FNAF and haven't seen these musicals, trust me, you're gonna love them. As others put it, watching this series will bring you back to the old days of FNAF when there was only 4 games, yet the lore was still as complicated. But pretty much in these musicals, each night was one song. The first night is Markiplier on his first night at the job, so obviously he realizes for the first time that the animatronics move and try to get to him, except this time, in this night one, we're getting to see the perspectives of the animatronics as well, and see what they're talking about to each other. And unlike the FNAF lore, this is the first main big difference. Each of the animatronics are actually friendly. They all want to help out Markiplier and be nice to him, but Markiplier, all he sees is moving creepy animatronics, so he still goes berserk and thinks they're out to kill him, when really none of them are out to kill them, they just want to say hi. But at the end of the day, it's all good because he ends up surviving his first night shift. Unfortunately, at the end of his first night shift, he gets the news broken to him that he still has 4 more nights to go. So of course, whenever night 2 rolls around, he does the only logical thing a person could do, and he brings an AK-47. Okay, now that I think about it, why haven't anybody else in the FNAF lore just bring a gun with them as a security guard? Even Michael Afton, who knows very well that all the animatronics are possessed, he still doesn't bring a gun with him in his later nights. Anyways, Markiplier's intentions here were to kill the animatronics that he thought were gonna try to kill him, but instead he actually ends up not killing any of the animatronics, and he accidentally kills a janitor.
You're not Foxy.
This causes him to run away from the police and dye his hair, so that way he can be undetected. Anyways, while Markiplier is laying low, Fazbear Entertainment still needs a security guard for the remaining nights, so they end up calling up Nate to fill in that role. So apparently Nate has worked at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza before, and apparently he witnessed the bite of 87, or the bite of 83, either one. The film just calls it The Bite, no year attached to it. Although this is another thing that these musicals do different from the actual FNAF lore. In the Random Encounters lore, apparently Freddy Fazbear was the one who did the bite. And according to Freddy, it was just an accident. Anyways, while Nate is filling over for Markiplier, Freddy and the gang end up coming across a mysterious package, which apparently holds Springtrap inside. And yet another thing that this film does differently than the FNAF lore is instead of Springtrap being William Afton stuck in the Spring Bonnie suit, Springtrap is instead a creation made by the purple guy who is different from William Afton in this film. More on that later. But anyways, Springtrap was created by the purple guy simply because the purple guy wanted more office hours so he could make more money. But anyways, Nate needed the help of Markiplier and Bonnie and Chica and Foxy and Freddy to finally defeat Springtrap. But anyways, the team ends up capturing Springtrap. The purple guy says sorry and he ends up being able to still get more office hours. And everything's all good and fine. The end. Right? Wrong. Because remember how earlier I said Purple Guy and William Afton aren't the same person? It turns out that William Afton is actually just MatPat in a Fredbear onesie. Oh, and he has a flamethrower. So they end up defeating MatPat and then they leave and pretty much start living their own lives normally from there. The end. So obviously, quite a bit of the lore is different from the Random Encounters musicals to the normal FNAF lore. So now let's see, based off of the dialogue between Wilford, Warfstache, and Phone Guy, is it the Random Encounters videos or is it the actual FNAF lore that's canon to the Markiplier lore? So now let's see what Phone Guy says to Wilford and see if it checks out.
Well, one would be in charge of viewing security cameras, and at one point would be in charge of using telekinetic powers to wind up a music box so the scary pop-up man doesn't go boo.
So far so good. There is one scene in the Random Encounters musical where MatPat gets jumped by the puppet. But listen to what Phone Guy has to say next, because this one's a bit of a tricky one.
Occasionally you have to put on a mask so the mechanical children's animatronics don't forcibly stuff you into an exoskeleton or jump out and go boo.
Now there is one scene in the first Random Encounters musical where Markiplier does try to put on some sort of mask to hopefully avoid the animatronics from getting to him, but he just did that from impulse. It was not provided to him by Fazbear Entertainment or anything like that. So originally, you might think that this might be a bit of a deal breaker, and it might deconfirm my theory about the Random Encounters videos being canon to the Markiplier lore. But there's a possibility that this doesn't deconfirm anything, based off of who the Phone Guy might be. Because in the Random Encounters musicals, Phone Guy is actually MatPat, aka William Afton. So if that's the case in here, we did see whenever MatPat was shown on screen that he did wear a full-on Freddy Fazbear suit, including a Freddy mask. So if MatPat was to be the one who's speaking on the phone right now, then there's actually a chance that this theory can still hold up. But besides that one little hiccup right there wasn't really anything else that could deconfirm these two timelines being connected. Everything else that the Phone Guy said was stereotypical FNAF stuff that was technically true for both the FNAF lore and the Random Encounters lore. Now there is the part that I already showed before in this video where Phone Guy talked about how the animatronics will try to stuff you in a Fazbear suit. I get that that really does lean a lot more heavily towards the normal FNAF lore and nothing really Random Encounters related. But then again, there's also the possibility that whoever this Phone Guy is just been fooled, just like how MatPat was fooled, that the animatronics are out to get him when really they're super nice. So with all that said, what is our final conclusion? Is the FNAF lore or is the Random Encounters lore canon to the Markiplier lore? So first of all, I fully believe that Markiplier had absolutely no intentions of connecting the Random Encounters lore with his lore whenever making this one Wilford Warfstache video. Even though most of the comments that Phone Guy makes don't really deconfirm the Random Encounters lore, it also leans heavily towards the normal FNAF lore. Now, does this mean that the Random Encounters and the Markiplier lore are connected? Well, it doesn't mean that they aren't. The Markiplier lore would be not affected and would still work fully without retconning itself at all if the FNAF Random Encounters musicals were canon to it, although I don't really picture Markiplier ever even considering that the two are connected. But technically they are connected because In Space with Markiplier brought up the idea of infinite universes, meaning infinite possibilities, meaning that there is one universe out there that is like the Random Encounters musicals. But in all seriousness, that's going to be it for this video. Make sure to like and subscribe for more Markiplier theories, and I will see y'all in the next video. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Markiplier theory. Now in this theory, I will be talking about a comment that one of you guys posted a while back that may be confirming that there's two Darkipliers in the Darkiplier lore. But once we're done talking with that, if we still have enough time, I may go over a couple more comments that you guys have posted and left on these theories. So yeah, if you end up liking this video by chance and you want to be featured in a future Markiplier theory, then make sure to comment down your own theories and thoughts in the comments. And with that said, let's go ahead and start talking about the possibility of two Darkipliers. So a couple weeks ago, Mandalorian Jedi posted a comment that couldn't even fit on my screen. I had to like scroll down to read all of it, which is awesome, by the way, shout out to him. But pretty much his comment says, I think that there are two Darkipliers, one fake one and one real one. Now whenever I first heard this statement, the first thing I thought of is how there are two Darkiplier outfits, one with a black suit and one with a white suit. In my past Markiplier theories, especially the one that he commented on, I did mention how there are two different outfits, but I didn't think much of it. I just thought it was kind of like how Wilford Warfstache gets a bit of a redesign every time he appears. But who knows, maybe both of these different suits means that they're both different Darkipliers. Anyways, let's keep reading to find out where he goes with this. The fake one fills the villain role that actor Mark was talking about in Damien. The real Darkiplier that is in the real world where actor Mark is from can control the fake Darkiplier in order to speak to us. Well, that is quite the statement. Let's go back to the ending of Damien to fully make sure and just kind of to see what the Mandalorian is talking about here. In the ending scene of Damien, Celine ends up giving up control of the Darkiplier body and lets Damien take over. And as I've said in every other Markiplier video, the Damien video takes place inside of Who Killed Markiplier, the final chapter. More specifically, whenever Darkiplier grabs Damien's cane and the hand switches from a girl hand to a boy hand. It is in that split second that all of the events of Damien happen inside of Darkiplier's head, and also in that second is whenever Darkiplier decides that if it's a villain actor Mark wants, then it's a villain he'll get. So with this information, what does the Mandalorian Jedi mean by the real world and the fake world? Well, I believe that obviously by the real world, he means the world where Wilford
Did you mean Wilford, mother-loving, Warfstache?
Yeah, thanks, Abe. Anyways, as I was saying, by the real world, of course he's talking about the world where Who Killed Markiplier, Wilford, mother-loving, Warfstache, I said it right that time, and all the other Markiplier projects that are actually real happen. And by the fake world, he probably means the films and YouTube videos that are in-universe made by actor Mark. These include things like a date with Markiplier, In Space with Markiplier in one of the timelines, and judging by a few pieces of dialogue, maybe even a heist with Markiplier.
Do you really want to know what's inside this box? The truth, not the lies he's told you.
But now that we've considered what's the real world and what's the fake world, this actually makes sense. This can work. There is a possibility that there is 2 Darkipliers. But anyways, let's continue reading and see what else he has to say. Damien and Celine aren't evil. Why do we think that Darkiplier threatens us in a date with Markiplier? He does not. The real one anyways. And what about the BTS and bloopers? The first thing you see is Darkiplier practicing for his part in a heist with Markiplier. Darkiplier filmed heist as well. Plus, he says to us that we are early, so meaning that we've entered the real world again. After we found out the truth about the crystal, Darkiplier ensured that we got the crystal in order to destabilize Aftermark's world. Now, starting from the beginning of that, I do agree with him that Damien and Celine aren't necessarily evil. They're just out for revenge. They're pretty much, they actually are kind of broken. And now, as for the BTS videos that he brings up, I never really considered those canon. I don't really get how they'd be able to be canon as well. If the BTS videos were canon, then that probably means that whenever Markiplier shows up there, then that would have to be Aftermark filming his stuff. But we all know, based off of one of the endings in A Date with Markiplier, how much of an asshole Aftermark really is when he's on set. So yeah, I'm willing to bet that the BTS videos aren't canon to the Markiplier lore. But as for the next thing that he brings up, where Darkiplier made sure that we end up getting the blue crystal to stop Aftermark's world. Now that statement could be true, but before we jump to conclusions, let's go ahead and check Darkiplier's relationship with our character that we play as to see if he would have actually needed our help or if he would actually have wanted our help in the first place to stop Aftermark. So Darkiplier is known to be a smart kind of manipulator type person, and if there is one thing that he wants more than anything, it's to get revenge on Aftermark. So this could definitely be the case. And now the question is, in which film or which video would Darkiplier be manipulating us into getting the blue crystal and stopping Aftermark? Well, now we're getting into some really complicated stuff timeline-wise, because the blue crystal pretty much like connects a lot of universes together. The blue crystal is what causes there to be end cards up on your screen, and it's like each end card is like a different timeline pretty much. So this does make things a lot more complicated in terms of when Darkiplier would have been using you to beat Aftermark. But we can actually go ahead and eliminate a lot of the past Markiplier projects. First off, we can take away In Space with Markiplier's Part 1 and 2, because Part 2 ended with the blue crystal coming to the Markiplier lore universe for the first time. So any interactions or anything Darkiplier and Aftermark had before then wouldn't have involved the blue crystal. And also, any of the Markiplier projects without end cards means that they probably don't involve the blue crystal either, since the blue crystal is, of course, what causes the end cards to appear. So we can already take away a lot right then and there as well. And if we also take away any of the other projects that don't involve Darkiplier, then that pretty much only leaves us with the heist with Markiplier and A Date with Markiplier. And in my past Markiplier theories, I have concluded that A Date with Markiplier comes after A Heist with Markiplier in the timeline, so I'd assume that he's talking about A Date with Markiplier whenever he says that Darkiplier manipulated us into getting the blue crystal from Aftermark to stop Aftermark's fake world. So that was a lot of information, but anyways, let's continue reading. Darkiplier ensured that we get the crystal in order to destabilize Aftermark's world. We've already said that. Although it didn't work. The scientist destroyed the box, and then once it... Oh, wait, so never mind. He was talking about A Heist with Markiplier, not A Date with Markiplier. Maybe I should read more before I jump to conclusions. Sorry guys, sorry Mandalorian Jedi. So as I was saying, the scientist destroyed the box, and then once In Space with Markiplier ends, the heist starts over because we caused another loop by stopping the paradox of In Space with Markiplier. And now here is where Mandalorian Jedi's comment differs from what I've established in my headcanon, because I have the controversial belief that In Space with Markiplier takes place in a whole other universe where the Markiplier lore doesn't take place, and pretty much anytime you go through the blue wormholes, you go into a different universe, and that final time the captain tossed the blue crystal into the blue wormhole, that caused the blue crystal to come into the Markiplier lore world. But yeah, throughout the rest of Mandalorian Jedi's comment, he comes up with some really crazy stuff that, if true, it can make us rethink the entirety of the Markiplier lore. So yeah, I really recommend going to my past Markiplier theory, where I pretty much talk about the whole timeline as a whole of the Markiplier lore, because there is where you'll be able to find Mandalorian Jedi's comment. I have truly only scraped the surface of Mandalorian Jedi's comment, and this is mainly because I don't want to steal the spotlight from him too much, so I recommend just, checking out the original comment if you're still interested. Sorry we did not have enough time in this video to go over a few of you guys' other comments as well. I will probably be dedicating a whole other Markiplier theory to just reading the rest of y'all's theories. And with that said, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're new. My next Markiplier theory probably won't be until a while, because I will start making a lot of Bendy and the Ink Machine Let's Plays to get ready for Bendy and the Dark Revival, which I will also be playing once it releases. So whenever I haven't uploaded a Markiplier theory in a while, don't think I've forgotten. I didn't forget. I'm just needing to play some other games first. So yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. Hey everybody, welcome back to another Markiplier theory. And in this theory, instead of talking about Darkiplier's origins for the 1,000,000th time, or trying to convince you yet again that In Space with Markiplier takes place in a whole other universe, instead, we're just talking about the good old man himself, Chef. Because believe it or not, Chef does have lore, he does have backstory, and he does have a couple scenes in Space with Markiplier that brings up a couple of questions. But before we get into all that mess, let's first just talk about his backstory. In Markiplier's I Explain Everything livestream, he explains everything about who killed Markiplier, and there is a certain point in time that I will show up on the screen if you want to go look for yourself, where he does talk about Chef's backstory.
Chef had hopes and dreams, wanted to aspire to be a TV chef or something, and then was stuck in a mansion for ages just because he had to make ends meet.
Probably wanted his own restaurant.
Stereotypical story.
Yeah, his hopes and dreams are dead. It's too
Happens to
fast.
so many people.
Yeah.
So Markiplier really just straight up said everything, literally just everything about Chef's lore right then and there. Poor Chef just had his dreams crushed and lost because he couldn't even make enough money to go out on his own and try to attempt to be this famous person or star that he wants to be. Pay your respects, put a F in the comments for Chef. Anyways, this backstory actually explains a lot about Chef's personality and why he's so angry and so grumpy all the time in Who Killed Markiplier. The dude's always grumpy because he spends his everyday life with a super successful and rich man who is able to succeed on his dream, that man being Actor Mark, causing Actor Mark to just be another reminder of how he lost his dreams and how he can no longer be able to achieve them. Now that I'm hearing this, I kind of want the next Markiplier project to have Chef owning his own restaurant or just being his own independent man. That would be a really nice tie-up for his storyline. But anyways, now that we know his lore, there's still one question left about the man himself. How did Chef go from a worker of Actor Mark's to a flat-out kidnapper? In A Date with Markiplier, we see a completely new side of Chef. Now he's evil, and now he likes to pretty much murder people and cook people into his food. And based off of the timeline that we've theorized about, A Date with Markiplier takes place way after Who Killed Markiplier. And if you haven't seen my past theories where I talk about the timeline, just as a quick catch-up, we can also tell that A Date with Markiplier comes after Who Killed Markiplier because of the fact that Darkiplier is in A Date with Markiplier. Meanwhile, Darkiplier literally gets created in Who Killed Markiplier. So if you don't know the Markiplier timeline, or you just don't agree with me on the proof about it, then that is some other proof that's undeniable. So with that information, it is undoubtable that after the events of Who Killed Markiplier, Chef quit working for Actor Mark, which we literally see him quit in the final part, and then he goes on to work at a restaurant from A Date with Markiplier. Although there is a chance that that isn't what happened, but more on that later. When you think about this objectively, it actually kind of does make sense that Chef would turn to a way of anger and murder and all that evil stuff. Whenever we interact with him in Who Killed Markiplier, he already kind of seems like he's well on his way towards that path. Your first impression of him already makes you think that he could have been the one who murdered Actor Mark, and possibly even murder you in the future. So yeah, it would make sense if over time Chef became more and more just slowly driven into madness, almost like a more angry version of Wilford Warfstache. However, there is a chance that this isn't the case, and that the chef from A Date with Markiplier might not be the same chef as the one from Who Killed Markiplier. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you Chef No Way Home. In Space with Markiplier Part 2, we see a restaurant being ran by many different variants of chef. And based off of Lady's dialogue, we can infer that it is a normal, common thing for people to travel the multiverse. So based off of how many chefs there are, it is most likely that all these chefs came from different universes and kind of all came together to form one restaurant. Although to be honest, it is still a possibility that all of these chefs are from one universe, since we do see a lot of Markiplier egos in the universe where the Markiplier lore takes place. There is a chance that there's just chef egos in that universe, kind of like how there's Markiplier alter egos in our universe, the Markiplier lore universe. But now you might be asking, why am I bringing up all of this in the first place? What's the point to this? Well, this scene in Space with Markiplier proves to us that there is more than just Markiplier alter egos and Markiplier lookalikes. There can be lookalikes of anybody, and it would be probably completely normal, especially for the Markiplier lore. Nobody ever questions why two people look exactly like the same person, why Actor Mark and Damien have the exact same face. Nobody ever questions those things. They just go on with their normal lives. So it's probably normal for other people, including Chef, to have alter egos and lookalikes. Although there is now the possibility that A Date with Markiplier Chef and Who Killed Markiplier Chef aren't the same person, I do think that they still might be the same person, because I do think that my past evidence about things like the similarity between their mental states still adds up. I think that still makes enough sense for both of them to be the same characters. However, there is still one more possibility I want to bring up based off of the In Space with Markiplier clip. So if you do end up getting kidnapped and almost cooked in one of the pathways in A Date with Markiplier, then how does Chef manage to pull that off? Surely the workers or the managers or somebody would not appreciate or not stand for Chef doing those things, and that's where this In Space with Markiplier clip comes into play. Let's say that the people running this chef restaurant are different variants of Chef from different universes, meaning that they traveled the multiverse to get here and work alongside other chefs. Don't you think that the said chef brand would end up having more restaurants than just this single one? What if the restaurant that you and Markiplier end up going to in A Date with Markiplier, where you end up getting kidnapped by Chef in the first place, is one of the restaurants ran by all chefs? And I know at the beginning we do see other people working there who aren't chef egos, but what if at least the boss or higher up is a chef alter ego or a chef from another other universe. That would explain why Chef kidnapped us with pretty much no repercussions. But then again, there is the possibility that just nobody knows Chef kidnapped us. And that's pretty much going to be it for this theory. But before I say the outro, I do want to say that including the Markiplier theory bites, this is my 51st Markiplier related video. Whether it's me ranking the top 10 best Markiplier egos, or also me again trying to figure out what the heck In Space with Markiplier Part 0 is, thank y'all for being here along the ride and watching up to this point. I know I haven't been uploading as much Markiplier content as I used to. I've just gotten into more gaming content as well, but don't worry, I plan on uploading even more Markiplier theories at a more consistent rate from now on. Thank y'all for watching, and thank y'all for sharing the love of Markiplier. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next theory. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Markiplier theory. And before we dig into Actor Mark and his connection towards the other Markiplier projects, I first want to begin this video by saying thank y'all. This is the first Markiplier theory of 2023, and thank y'all for making last year awesome. We kicked off the Markiplier theory series last April, and since then we've done over 50 of these videos. Now on one hand, you could call that milking this franchise, but on the other hand, you guys like to see it, so I'm just providing for y'all. But anyways, enough real talk, let's get into why y'all really clicked on this video, Markiplier. More specifically, Actor Mark. Because over time, as we began to talk more and more about the timeline specifically in the Markiplier lore, I began to realize an overwhelming problem that seemed to be largely unanswered by the community. And that question quite simply is, who is Actor Mark? And more specifically, like, what kind of characters has Actor Mark played? Has Actor Mark played Engineer Mark? Is Actor Mark really Heist Markiplier? Is he really Date Markiplier? Or perhaps he's not any of them? I know that question sounds dumb, but take a second to think about it. In one of the endings of A Date with Markiplier, we do see Actor Mark come out of character and get to see the behind the scenes of A Date with Markiplier. But based off of the implications of the blue crystal, is Actor Mark really Date Markiplier in all the other videos as well? And if A Heist with Markiplier is supposed to come right before A Date with Markiplier, then does that mean Heist Markiplier is also Actor Mark? Well, the answer is honestly yes and no at the same time. And just like many other reveals about the Markiplier lore, it's all because of the blue crystal. So usually whenever I mention the Markiplier timeline in these Markiplier theories, I'm talking about one specific timeline. That timeline being the one that includes Who Killed Markiplier, Wilford, Mother-Loving Warfstache, Damien, A Heist with Markiplier, A Date with Markiplier, and many other smaller Markiplier ego-themed projects, but not including In Space with Markiplier. In Space with Markiplier is its own separate timeline that's different from the Markiplier lore timeline. How do we know this, you may ask? Well, that's because in Space with Markiplier, the Captain and Engineer Mark use the blue crystal to go from timeline to timeline, hence why they go from their normal sci-fi timeline to suddenly a black and white detective timeline to an almost more action-y movie-like timeline in just the matter of a few videos. If you're still not convinced, then I really recommend watching my past Markiplier theories where I go more in depth in this. But for this video, let's not try to get too off track. But anyways, the way the blue crystal does this is by the power of YouTube end cards. I believe anytime you're playing In Space with Markiplier, A Heist with Markiplier, or even A Date with Markiplier, the end cards that pop up change the timeline that you're currently going through and can set you through a somewhat different timeline where all your past decisions up until that very moment were the exact same the entire time. Kind of like in real life if you think about it deep enough. But that means that every time you choose an end card, another end card will spark another variant timeline of the Markiplier lore timeline, based off of the option that you didn't choose and the set of options that would have came after the non-chosen option. So Neo, you may ask, if there's lots of variants of the Markiplier lore timeline, then which one is technically the canon Markiplier lore? Which end cards and endings will lead us through the path of the official Markiplier lore timeline, as I like to call it in all of my Markiplier theories? And to solve this, you may think that we need to choose the endings that will lead us to the next video that's meant to be in the timeline of the Markiplier lore. However, for some of these projects, this isn't actually the case. Like with A Heist with Markiplier, I believe there is multiple endings that take place in the same timeline. These two endings being endings 30 and 31, since they both feature you, the protagonist, restarting from the beginning of the heist all over again, almost like a time loop. I think that for the official Markiplier lore timeline, and only that timeline, we will have endings 30, then ending 31, and then after that, the ending that will be next, where it fully stops the loop and actually has you continue on with A Date with Markiplier, will be the zombie apocalypse ending where you teamed up with the crazy scientist lady to stop the anomaly, whatever you're supposed to call it, the blue crystal, pretty much. The reason I believe that this is the final ending for A Heist with Markiplier that takes place in the Markiplier lore timeline is because of the final sentence that Heist Markiplier asks you in the ending.
You, want to go on that date?
I believe that those words is what sets up A Date with Markiplier. So now with A Heist with Markiplier out of the way, which end cards and which ending in A Date with Markiplier is the one that officially goes in the Markiplier lore timeline? Because remember, they're still all canon, they're just all their own separate timeline in the Markiplier multiverse. Well, unfortunately, with how late A Date with Markiplier is into the Markiplier lore timeline, I don't think we can yet tell which ending is canon. I think first Markiplier needs to make a brand new project that actually takes place after the events of A Date with Markiplier. Then we might be able to tell from there which ending is the canon ending. And right now, whenever I'm saying canon ending, I don't mean that like which ending is the actual real ending and which one of them don't even matter to the lore, because like actually they are all technically canon. I just want to make this part very clear, like they're all technically canon, they're just all canon in their own separate timelines. And whenever I'm asking which ending or which choices is canon, I'm mainly talking about which one is canon to the timeline that we're building at the moment. So finally, with all that out of the way, if you're still understanding and you're not completely lost in the idea of a Markiplier multiverse, you might be wondering, so what? Why does all this explanation, what does it have to do with Actor Mark and other characters he could possibly be playing as? Well, going off of what we've been talking about throughout this video, Actor Mark is and isn't all these other Markiplier characters all at the same time. There is one timeline where he is Engineer Mark and another timeline where he's not. There's one timeline where he is Heist Markiplier and one timeline where he's not. And because there's infinite timelines, infinite choices, and infinite possibilities, then if you really want to answer the question on if Actor Mark is any of these characters, you have to specify that question down to what timeline. What Actor Mark in what timeline? What variation of Actor Mark? Based off of Actor Mark's cameo in Space with Markiplier, we can tell that there is a timeline where Actor Mark is playing as Engineer Mark. However, that timeline is also separate from the timeline where the rest of the events of In Space with Markiplier take place, so even though Engineer Mark and Actor Mark might have been the same person in that one Easter egg, it was only that Easter egg, or only that scene where they were the same person, only that single universe or timeline. Since In Space with Markiplier has both the Captain and Engineer Mark hopping through different timelines and going through different timelines, usually throughout the rest of the timelines that they go into, Engineer Mark is his own person and isn't just acted out by Actor Mark. And the same exact logic is applied to a heist with Markiplier and a date with Markiplier, where whether or not Actor Mark is heist Markiplier or Actor Mark is date Markiplier really depends on which end cards you end up choosing. Where ending 1 out of 10, aka the meta ending in a date with Markiplier, that one outright confirms that this whole time, date Markiplier is just another character that Actor Mark has to act as, which also makes heist Markiplier another character that Actor Mark has to act as, since for date Markiplier to even exist, date Markiplier and heist Markiplier have to be the same person, based off of heist Markiplier's lines at the end of a heist with Markiplier. However, this is only one of many timelines where Actor Mark is playing these two characters. There are many other end cards and many of other choices throughout a heist with Markiplier and a date with Markiplier that have no relation towards Actor Mark, therefore making me believe that those other timelines just aren't even about Actor Mark. Like, Actor Mark could be a character in those timelines, however, he's not playing as heist Markiplier or date Markiplier. So even though there may only be one timeline that we know about so far where Actor Mark is playing heist Markiplier and date Markiplier and also technically Engineer Mark, I do think that in every timeline where a date with Markiplier exists, I believe date Markiplier is the same person as a heist Markiplier. But pretty much the TLDR of all of this is that because of the blue crystal, Actor Mark is playing Engineer Mark, heist Mark, and even date Markiplier in probably like 1 or 2 timelines. However, there are still many other choices that spark many other timelines that have no relation towards Actor Mark, and Actor Mark does not play any of these other characters and egos. Yet with all these revelations, there's still one question that we technically can't solve yet. In the Markiplier lore timeline specifically, is Actor Mark playing heist Markiplier, date Markiplier, and or Engineer Markiplier? And the reason we can't answer that question yet is because there isn't a Markiplier project that takes place after the events of a date with Markiplier that tells us which ending is canon in a date with Markiplier. So until we end up finding out which ending is the one that takes place in the Markiplier lore timeline for a date with Markiplier, there is a 1 out of 10 chance that Actor Mark is playing these other egos in the Markiplier lore timeline, the main timeline that we mainly focus on whenever it comes to these big Markiplier projects. And the reason I say 1 out of 10 specifically is because only 1 out of 10 of the endings in a date with Markiplier is the one where Actor Mark seems to be playing as these other egos. So with that said, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did enjoy, and I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.